Hi, Suzy.
Hi, Arthur.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I'm
Good.
very good. Thank you for this conversation today.
Suzy Sikorski, you are junior art specialist in the Department of Modern and Contemporary Middle Eastern Art at Christie's in Dubai. But we also know you as the founder of the online platform Middle East Art, where you publish all your research work on the art scene from the Gulf region, but also from the Levant region. And I invited you to discuss this project of Mid East Art and as well as your research work on the art from the Gulf region. My first question for you is, what attracted you to work on the art of the Gulf region since you arrived in the UAE in 2014?
Yes, so thank you so much, Arthur, for having me on this discussion and sharing my story of how I came all the way from New York and found a home here in Dubai, as well as my heart is throughout the region really. I studied abroad in 2014 in American University of Sharjah with the intention always to focus on art from the region, but I didn't think that the niche would be Khaliji art specifically. It was actually through learning about the art scene in the UAE while I was in university in New York, learning about the different artists. But it was only when I came here and then met the brother of Abdel Nasser Garim, who's a Saudi artist based in Riyadh, and he connected me to a few local artists here, which sparked this question of what is the connection within the Gulf region. I was really interested in interviewing artists, speaking to artists, hearing their stories of where they came from, what inspires them, what makes them tick, their daily rituals that they do. And it sparked a lifelong interest into the region. Mideast art originally was an Instagram that I started right before I went to Sharjah, and it was purely as a way to learn and to remember all of these artists' names, to link together, to put the puzzle pieces together. There was a few, of course, periodicals, Canvas magazine, Harper's at the time I was reading, and I was able to contribute, but I started it just as a way on my Instagram, and that was my earliest moment into documenting the scene.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So for your work process, can you explain us your work process concerning the artists? How did you approach them, and what kind of archives were you able to retrieve and you were looking for?
So my first focus when I came here, naturally, since Abdel Nasser Garim connected me to many of these artists, so you're showing a few. Abdul Qadir al-Rais is one of them, who's on the left. I started interviewing these artists right away, and publishing in different magazines, and putting the puzzle pieces together. I would obviously just go straight to the artists. Emirates Fine Art Society at the time helped me, which is the first national art society that was founded in UAE 1980. And so I naturally was attracted to many of the pioneer older artists in the UAE. And in terms of my methodology at the time, that has obviously evolved since knowing that I'm very particular in terms of archiving and collecting stories. But at the time, it was really map making of figuring out, who were the first artists, where were the centers, where were the hubs, obviously within the UAE, but evolving over time in the Gulf region, which is really my focus that I would like to expand on. But that was early on, finding out which artists were friends, which artists were not friends, which artists were inspired, what were the collectives and the movements that were forming at the time.
Yeah, and concerning your, did you face any challenges and difficulties while you were doing all of this
Of
work?
course, you know, they've changed day to day the challenges that I have, but in the beginning, of course, it was I knew no one. You know, I came here not from the region. I'm fully American, and it was just really through identifying, you know, certain contacts through even through Instagram. I mean, I met the first Master Abdullah, who was then the chairman of the Emirates Fine Arts Society, purely through Instagram. I was, you know, connecting with different people from the region, and it all kind of interlinked in terms of kind of finding the right people to help me and to put me in touch with the certain artists or with the certain specialists and the right people that I needed. You're showing some images. Dr. Mohammed Youssef was actually one of the first artists that I interviewed, who was the first chairman of the Emirates Fine Arts Society in 1980. And, you know, as part of what interests me, of course, when I visit these artist studios, is to go right to their treasure trove of photographs. And it's, you know, for me, a picture, and for many people, a picture speaks 1,000 words. I speak very beginner intermediate Arabic, and at the time obviously I was learning it even more so, and so just to look through old images was so important. This one particularly is when Dr. Mohammed was studying in Cairo in the late 70s, and was showing me some of his images. This one on the left is Ammar al-Attar, who actually would go through old cinema archives throughout the UAE and found a few slides. This one is an advertisement slide. He actually, in a way, is very parallel to me and hoards many objects throughout the country.
Hmm. And what was your main purpose from an Instagram account to create an online platform? You said to show your work on archival, but also something else.
So I had mentioned earlier Abdel Nasser Garam, and he was the one who really connected me to many of these Emirati artists. I started interviewing these artists at the time. Sam Abdelaziz, she was still here. Hassan Sharif was unfortunately too sick at the time to meet him, but I based and framed my undergrad thesis on these artists. Yeah. And that sparked my thesis on UAE art history since the 1970s. I chose specific artists by decade, which ones were notable for what reasons, and kind of trace the development of the UAE art scene since then. Mideast art was actually through, I had a Fulbright scholarship that I was awarded through my undergrad thesis that was in 2016 to 2017. And so I ventured out to the UAE and was able finally to do all of my field work and more. My research that I did during this time was focused specifically on the UAE. I made a few trips throughout the Gulf as part of that wider goal of connecting the art movements throughout. But Mideast art was fully materialized through my Fulbright research. So it was all of the artists that I had mapped out that I wanted to interview. I would venture to their studios by taxi, by bus, by foot. I didn't have a car at the time. I had this New Yorker nature in me that I thought, I could handle the public transit, and it was a very, very interesting experience to travel all the way on a bus to Khorfa Khan. And I would, I visited these artists. I met their families. I interviewed them. I did a lot of voice recordings. I did video recordings, and I would transcribe them and feature them, in short segments. So I had people, helping in terms of video editing, short clips from these artists.
Yeah. So we can find all of these information on your website, but also when we go over your website, we understand that you want to give an educational dimension to Mideast art, especially through a series of stories on the Instagram account. The first one is the Artists in Quarantine series. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yes, I have to say the Artists in Quarantine series probably helped me, and obviously maybe helped other artists to find another community, but it personally helped me a lot get through the quarantine. I mean, I'm here on my own. We're all doing as much as we can to stay social, stay active, but it was a very difficult time during this. And I naturally am, you know, like a studio cat. I go to these artists' studios. It gives me energy. It gives me, you know, all of my passion involves meeting these artists, meeting these, you know, researchers, and so I naturally just started to you know, speak to these artists and ask them what are they doing, what's making them interested, what changes in their artistic process are they doing, and I naturally am a scrapbooker and a hands-on person. I love making, you know, with my hands, and I can only say stories, especially on Instagram, are my version of a digital scrapbook. And so I love and put much time into it, but they're all like my own little artworks in themselves, my own little collages. And so I did this Artists in Quarantine series that is still going on, and I'm going to be publishing the 100th post shortly, all about the stories of these artists. And it was a very, very self-fulfilling, empowering project for me to document and archive all of the emotions that artists are going through right now. And mind you, you speak about challenges. Some artists, you know, obviously did not want to take part in it. Other artists were so happy and showering me with photographs and quotes that I had to cut that were, you know, so long. Other artists went through writer's block of just trying to explain what they were going through. It was a very difficult time, and a difficult time in some, and, you know, positive takeaway for many. But I appreciated all across the board. And so, you know, I asked them to share an image of their studio space, anything that they wanted. It's their own creative space that they can do. And then I made a story out of it. I did these episodes that I have saved, actually every single one of them. I think I did about 18 in-depth episodes that I would feature about 10 artists per episode. And they were curated episodes that I did that gave me this chance to actually, you know, curate my own digital space for the first time, and choosing which artists in the stories to put together, you know, from all over. So it was a really exciting project, and I can only tell you how grateful I am of how many people it has touched in terms of artists, knowing other artists, being part of a community. I even had, you know, a subscriber. I kind of put together a little newsletter specifically for the artists that were part of this quarantine, and I sent them a video of myself speaking, and I talked to them, and I sent them, you know, a brief one, just kind of thanking them for sharing with me their stories. So it's still ongoing. Of course, the quarantine has shaped and evolved, but I will never forget, you know, the heat of those quarantine days. Yeah.
How did you see the impact of the quarantine on the artists' works?
I think you have a mix between people that have kind of gone way off social media and that are working privately, changing completely their platform and their intentions, and others that are showering social media publicly with their work. You know, that's what I've found. You find a lot of artists, I think now might be the time, because, you know, the quarantine, let's say, is lessening, but in the beginning it was too ripe and too short of time to really gauge how much their practice has changed and shaped. I think we might be seeing the fruits of, let's say, the quarantine, that time, whether it was traumatic or, you know, a turning point in a positive way for artists. But I think now you see a lot of, you know, artists sharing their story of how this time has shaped them.
Yeah. And another series that you've recently started, actually, it's called The Golden Days.
Yes, I'm obsessed with archiving and photographs. And I don't know, I guess it was something during the quarantine. I've been very catchy in terms of all of these different series. Before the Golden Days, and as part of the Artists in Quarantine, the Quarantine series started. And that was, I did a bunch of essays and interviews featured on just quarantine, isolation, in-betweenness. So that's featured on my site. I had a few interviews which were really, really exciting interviews. One was on Inji Aflatoon, who was jailed in prison in the late 1950s, and I featured a post specifically on that. Another one was on in-betweenness, where you have this exhibition, Bain, in between, in Arabic, that was in part of UAE Unlimited a few years ago. I interviewed Manila Saik, a local curator here, which was great. And so there was, I think I've been very creative in terms of just kind of having these series. This one particular, Golden Days, is something that is, I think, going to be ongoing for a long, long time. There are a bunch of artist archival photographs that I found. And I share, a brief story about the photograph, particularly about the photograph, and then explain, a bit more about the piece or the artist in particular. I'm looking at Ibrahim Salahi in Museum of Modern Arts. And then I'm looking at, Sultan Gallery first exhibition, 1969 on the upper left, the first UAE Fine Arts Society exhibition, 1981 on the upper right. So yeah, I'm very attracted to old photos, and I love the posts and the comments that people have, both private and public, that they share with me, what the photos remind them of. Such as the lower right, Saliba Douehi in the mountains, people in Lebanon. It might bring back sentiments. The Arab Image Foundation on the left, middle left, is another one that is obviously dedicated towards archiving many old photographs. This woman is in Tripoli, so it's very special to me.
Because with this Golden Days series, you extend your research to the art of the Middle East in general, not specifically.
Exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, and I had thought about this, my platform is Mideast Arts. Of course, I'm very focused on the Gulf arts, but the more that you learn about the Middle East, as I said, since I'm not from here and I'm learning so much, as much as I'm, I come in and have all of these different artist stories, and you connect them throughout the region. Artists were studying in Cairo, in Baghdad, and in Beirut, and it's you cannot limit to one country. No. And it kind of opens up a constellation of art communities and centers that were interlinked, which is great, and it really helps in further grounding and contextualizing the research that I'm doing that is more recent, 70s and 80s.
And during the quarantine, earlier this spring, you collaborated with the UAE Embassy's Cultural Diplomacy Department in Washington, D.C. by conducting interviews with artists from the Gulf region. What was the purpose of this collaboration?
Yes, that was another one that got me through the quarantine and kept me very busy, and has shifted the nature of even my research focus and the methodology that I want going forward. It was 4 parts to the digital programming series that I did with the Cultural Diplomacy Department in Washington, D.C. So 3 of them were an interview component, which included 2 interviews that I had between a local Emirati artist and then a US-based artist, which was really exciting to bridge the 2 worlds. Luckily, of those that I chose, they knew each other beforehand. They had a few workshops together. So I did Ammar Al-Attar and Stephen Shore. and they had met in a workshop in Abu Dhabi, over a decade ago. It was all about photography, about archiving. I mean, Stephen Shore documented Andy Warhol's factory, and Ammar had his own documenting of the art scene here, and that he still does in archiving. Then you had Diana Al-Hadid, the Syrian artist based in New York, and Sheikha Mazroy, which was great. And Sheikha actually helped Diana in the Sharjah Biennale almost 10 years ago as well. So, and you had, it was very interesting. Diana was really interviewing Sheikha. She was so interested. I mean, both of them were very, in terms of materiality, in terms of their inspirations, which was great. And then I actually did a studio visit with Najuma Ghanem, who's a poet, a writer, an artist, that I went to her home in Dubai, and they produced a film of me interviewing her specifically on, of course, her practice, but her role in the art scene since, the 70s. So, and then it ended on a panel discussion, yeah, which was really exciting to have.
So why important to include Middle East art in that kind of program?
As in, why did they?
Yeah.
It was right when I started. I sent out newsletters. I was doing, these quarantine themed writings. I was doing a lot of interviews with artists on the quarantine, and this was at a time when the embassy was really doing a lot of projects on digital programming and interviewing artists. And the beauty is, when you even look at these, it's almost like a historical archive in itself, because we were documenting what these artists are doing or not doing, and what the quarantine has done and shifted in their practice. So I think it memorializes a moment in the quarantine, which is very special. To be able to have and record. There are 30-minute interviews. It's an hour panel discussion. So they're very timely memories that I have.
Yeah.